He has nothing left. The room is cold and the light is low. The numbers on the screen do not move. He has been staring at them for a long time now. They are the same numbers they were an hour ago. They are the same numbers they were yesterday. Nothing is changing. Nothing is moving in the right direction. Two companies, both nearly dead. 14 years of work, gone in a single summer. A phone sits on the table next to him. It has been ringing all day. Investors, journalists, board members, people who want answers he does not have. He does not pick it up. He cannot find the words right now. He cannot find anything right now except the silence of this room and the cold feeling that everything he built is about to disappear. Outside, journalists are already writing the story of how Elon Musk failed. They have seen the numbers. They know about the rockets that did not reach space. They know about the car company that cannot pay its workers. They have the headline ready. They are waiting for the end. They are certain the end is coming. But here is what the journalists do not know. They do not know what is happening inside this man's mind. They do not know the decision he is about to make. They do not know that in a few weeks, everything, absolutely everything, is going to change direction. Some people call him a genius. Others say he built his empire by pushing people far past their limits, by demanding the impossible, by treating human beings like fuel for his own ambitions, and never once stopping to ask if that was right or fair or kind. Both things might be true at the same time. That is what makes this story worth telling. By the end of this video, you will understand the one decision that changed everything, the decision made at the absolute worst moment, when any reasonable person would have stopped, when the smart move was clearly to walk away and protect what little was left. And you will understand why almost nobody tells the full story of what that decision actually cost. But to understand that moment, we need to go back to the very beginning, not to Silicon Valley, not to America. We need to go back much further, to a small city in South Africa, to a house that did not feel like a home, and to one strange habit that nobody around him took seriously, a boy who could not stop reading, even when there was nothing left to read. Pretoria, South Africa, 1980. The house is quiet, not the peaceful kind of quiet that comes after a good day, the empty kind, the kind that fills a room when the people inside it have stopped talking to each other. Elon Musk is 9 years old. He sits in the corner of the room with a book open on his knees. His back is against the wall. His legs are stretched out on the floor. He is completely still, except for his eyes, which are moving fast across the page. He does this for hours. He does it every day. He has already finished every book in his school library, every single one. When the librarian told him there were no new books left, he did not know what to do. So he asked her if there was anything else. She pointed him toward the reference section, the part of the library where the encyclopedias live, the books that are not stories, just facts, just knowledge, organized from A to Z. Elon started reading them, not one volume, all of them, in order from the beginning. By the time he was 10 years old, Elon Musk had read the entire encyclopedia. He did not read it to pass a test. He did not read it because a teacher told him to. He read it because knowledge felt like the only solid thing in a world that did not feel solid at all. He did not have many friends. This is important to understand. It was not simply that he was quiet or shy. It was something else.
He talked the wrong things at the wrong times. He talked about science when other children wanted to talk about sport. He talked about space when other children talked about television. He was fascinated by ideas that other 9-year-olds found boring and strange. And when someone said something that was factually incorrect, Elon would correct them immediately, without softening it, without thinking about how it might sound. Other children did not like this. Some of them hit him for it. There was one incident that he has spoken about as an adult. A group of boys threw him down a flight of concrete stairs. He was in the hospital for a week. He still has some effects from that injury today. And then, when he was 9 years old, his parents divorced. This is not unusual. Many children grow up in divorced families and live full, happy lives. But Elon made a choice that he would later say was the wrong one. He chose to live with his father, Elon Musk. Perhaps he thought his father needed him. Perhaps he thought it was the responsible thing to do. Whatever the reason, it changed his childhood in ways he still doesn't talk about fully. His father was a difficult man, intelligent, technically minded, but cold, critical, sometimes cruel in ways that left no physical marks. Elon has said in interviews as an adult that he believes his father is not a good person. He rarely says more than that. But the silence in that house was not comfortable silence. It was the silence of a child learning not to need warmth. So he read. He read about rockets and how they worked. He read about electricity and the people who discovered it. He read about chemistry and physics and the history of human civilization. He read about wars and revolutions and the decisions that changed the course of history. He built an entire library inside his own mind, not because anyone told him to, but because knowledge was the only thing no one could take away from him. At 12 years old, Elon wrote a small video game. It was a simple space game called Blastar. He sold the code to a computer magazine for $500 American. He was 12 years old, and he had made something from nothing, just from what was inside his head. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was proof that his mind had value. Proof that the things he cared about, the strange things that made other children avoid him, were actually useful in the real world. He was relentless. That means he never stopped moving forward, no matter how hard things became. Even at 12, even in that cold house with an absent father, he was already practicing the thing that would define his entire life. As a teenager, Elon became more and more certain that he did not belong in South Africa, not because the country was bad, but because what he wanted to do with his life, the scale of it, the ambition of it, felt impossible there. He wanted to be in America. He had read about Silicon Valley. He had read about NASA. He had read about the companies and the universities where people were building the future. He applied to study in Canada first because his mother May had Canadian family connections. She had a Canadian passport. It was a small door, a technical door, but Elon pushed it open. He arrived in Canada at 17 years old with almost nothing in his bag and almost nothing in his bank account. He had the address of a cousin who had offered him a place to stay. He took a bus across the country. He called the cousin from a phone when he arrived. The cousin was not home. Elon Musk slept on the floor of a stranger's apartment that first night. He did not know where his next meal was coming. He found work on a farm cutting vegetables. He found work in a lumber mill cleaning wood chips from dangerous industrial machines, a job so physically hard and so unpleasant that most workers lasted only a few days. He lasted longer than that. He needed the money. $12 an hour. He saved every cent. This is not a story that begins with advantages. This is not a story about a rich family with the right connections in the right places. This is a story that begins with a boy alone in a cold house with an encyclopedia and no one to explain what to do with it. He eventually made his way to Queen's University in Canada and then transferred to the University of Pennsylvania in the United States. This was already an achievement that most people from his background would not reach. But Elon was not interested in simply reaching places. He was interested in what he could do when he got there. At Penn, he studied two subjects at the same time, economics and physics. Most students choose one field and go deep. Elon wanted both. He wanted to understand how money works and how the physical universe works, and he believed, correctly as it turned out, that the most important opportunities in the world lived at the intersection of those two things. He graduated. He applied to one of the most competitive doctoral programs in the world, a PhD in energy physics at Stanford University in California. He was accepted. This alone, for a young man who had arrived in North America with almost nothing just a few years earlier, was remarkable. He arrived at Stanford. He registered. He went to his first day of orientation. 2 days later, he left. He had decided the internet was the most important thing happening in the world, and that a PhD was not the fastest path to the place he wanted to go. He called his brother Kimball, who was also in the United States, and together they started a company. They called it Zip2.
The idea was simple: digital city guides and maps for newspaper companies, at a time when most newspapers did not have websites and most people had never used online maps. It seems obvious now. In 1995, it was genuinely new. They had no office. They worked from a small rented space, and they slept there too, on couches and on the floor, because they could not afford both rent for an apartment and rent for an office. They went to the local YMCA, that is a community center with showers and sports facilities, to clean up every morning before work. Every dollar the company earned went directly back into the company. Elon paid himself almost nothing for the first 2 years, not because he enjoyed being poor, because he understood already at this age that the way to make a company grow is to feed the company first and feed yourself later. In 1999, a large technology company called Compaq purchased Zip2 for $307 million. Elon Musk received $22 million. He was 27 years old. Think about that number for a moment. $22 million. For most people, that is enough money for an entire lifetime. For most people, that is the moment you stop. You buy a house, you invest carefully, you live comfortably for the rest of your days. Elon looked at that $22 million and put $10 million of it immediately into his next idea. An online financial services company, a way to send money over the internet at a time when internet banking barely existed. He called it X.com. It merged with a competitor, went through a significant internal battle over direction and leadership, and eventually became something the entire world would come to know, a company called PayPal. In 2002, eBay purchased PayPal for $1.5 billion. Elon Musk received $180 million from that sale. He was 30 years old. He had built 2 companies from nothing and sold them both. He had more money than he had ever imagined holding.
He had proven twice that his instincts were right when almost everyone around him said he was wrong. And now he was about to do something that would make even the people who believed in him question his sanity. But what he found next had nothing to do with money. Elon Musk decided he wanted to go to Mars. Not as a distant dream, not as a poster on a wall. He wanted to make it happen within his lifetime. He believed, deeply and seriously, that human beings needed to become a species that lived on more than one planet, because if something catastrophic happened to Earth, and he believed something eventually would, then everything humanity had ever built, every piece of art and music and science and love would be gone forever. This was not a business calculation. This was something closer to a moral conviction. He began by trying to buy a rocket. He flew to Russia, which had a large supply of old Soviet-era rockets that were no longer being used, and attempted to purchase one. He went 3 times. He came with serious money. He came with technical knowledge, with engineers, with real proposals. The Russians did not take him seriously. Here was a young American with internet money trying to buy a rocket. They thought it was a joke. They quoted him prices designed to make him go away. They refused to sell him. On the flight home from his 3rd failed trip to Russia, Elon opened a laptop and started building a spreadsheet. He was calculating something. He was calculating whether it would be possible, financially, technically, physically possible, to build a rocket from scratch rather than buying one. Not a small rocket, a real orbital rocket, the kind that could reach space. The calculation said it might be possible. He landed in America and started SpaceX. He put $100 million of his own money into the company in its first year. $100 million, more than half of everything he had made from PayPal. His friends thought he had lost his mind. Financial advisors told him that over 90% of rocket companies fail. Aerospace engineers told him it could not be done by a private company with no government contracts and no aerospace history. Around the same time, because apparently one impossible challenge was not enough, Elon invested $70 million into a small electric car startup called Tesla Motors. The company had been founded by 2 engineers named Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning, but it was struggling to move from concept to product. Elon joined the board as chairman. Then, after a period of internal conflict over the direction of the company, he became CEO. 2 companies, both in industries where failure was the normal outcome, both burning through money at a speed that made financial analysts nervous just to read about. The critics were immediate and they were loud. Serious automotive industry analysts wrote that Tesla had no realistic chance of competing with companies like Toyota, Ford, and General Motors, companies with decades of manufacturing experience, global supply chains, and billions of dollars in existing infrastructure. An electric car that regular people would actually want to buy was, according to most experts, still at least 20 years away. SpaceX received similar treatment. Former NASA engineers publicly questioned whether a private company led by an internet entrepreneur could build safe, reliable rockets. The history of private space ventures was not encouraging. Most had failed quickly and expensively. Revenue, that means the money a company earns from selling its products or services, was almost zero at SpaceX in those early years.
The company was spending enormous amounts of money on research, engineering, and testing, and earning almost nothing back. It was running purely on Elon's investment and his belief that the math would eventually work out. By 2008, he had put almost everything he had into these two bets. He had borrowed money from friends to cover personal expenses. When a journalist asked him how he was doing financially, he said he was fine. He was not fine. He knew it. Some of the people around him knew it, but he kept moving. And then the world made everything worse. In 2008, the global financial crisis arrived. Banks failed. Investment dried up. Companies that had been struggling began to collapse entirely. The timing for two companies that needed outside investment to survive could not have been worse. 3 of SpaceX's first 3 rockets had already failed to reach orbit. 3 attempts, 3 failures. The first rocket was destroyed by a fuel leak fire. The second reached higher, but failed due to engine problems. The third, the one that was supposed to be the proof that SpaceX had solved the problems, failed for a different reason. The first stage of the rocket, falling back toward Earth after separation, collided with the second stage, which was still trying to climb. The payload on that third rocket included a container of human ashes. A family had paid to send their loved ones' remains toward the stars. Those ashes burned up in the atmosphere. At Tesla, investors were beginning to pull out. The board was fractured. One influential member was actively pushing to sell the company before it ran completely out of money. The Model S, Tesla's first real consumer car, was years from production. The company had no product on the market that regular people could buy.
And that decision, the one that had looked like courage in 2002, was about to cost him something he could never get back. It is August 2008. Elon Musk has almost no money left. Both companies are weeks from total collapse. He cannot sleep properly. He is losing weight. The people around him are scared. Some of the best engineers at SpaceX are updating their resumes. Some of them have already accepted job offers elsewhere. Tesla's payroll is uncertain. Employees are coming to work not knowing if their salary will arrive. The board is meeting without Elon present. There are conversations about closing Tesla entirely. There are conversations about selling to a larger company for whatever they can get. Investors who had promised money are not returning calls. Suppliers are demanding immediate payment. There is no immediate payment available. Elon gives an interview to a journalist during this period. He begins to cry. Not for a moment. He cries through the interview. He says this is the worst year of his life. He says he still believes the companies will survive. He says the technology is real. He says the mission matters. He sounds like a man reciting words he needs to hear himself say. He sounds like a man who does not know if any of it is true anymore. But in September, there is one more chance. SpaceX has enough money for exactly one more launch. If this one fails, the company is finished. There is no more money. There is no backup plan. There is no investor waiting to save them. This is the last attempt. Remember the decision we mentioned at the very beginning? We're almost there. September 28, 2008.
Kwajalein Atoll, a small group of islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, thousands of kilometers from the nearest major city. This is where SpaceX built its first launch site because launching rockets requires being far from populated areas. The Falcon 1 rocket stands on the launch pad. It is not a large rocket by the standards of NASA or the Russian space program, but it is real. It was designed from the ground up by a team of engineers who had never built an orbital rocket before. Engineers who had been working impossible hours for years under pressure that most people in any industry never experience. The team is exhausted. Some of them have been awake for more than 40 consecutive hours. They've been running final checks, fixing small problems, running the checks again. The launch has been delayed multiple times. The tension on that small island is the kind that sits in people's chests and does not move. Elon walks through the facility before the launch. He does not gather everyone together for a motivational speech. He walks from person to person, from station to station. He looks at what they are doing. He asks questions. He makes eye contact. To each person, he says something simple and direct. We are going to make it, not as a question, as a statement. Whether he believed it completely in that moment, only he knows. The launch sequence begins. The engines ignite. The rocket rises from the pad. It clears the launch tower. It accelerates. It keeps going. The team watches the data. Every second that passes without a failure is a second closer to orbit. 20 seconds, 40 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes. The rocket passes through the most dangerous part of the lower atmosphere. It keeps climbing. 9 minutes and 30 seconds after launch, the Falcon 1 rocket reaches orbital velocity. It is in space. It is the first privately built, privately funded liquid-fueled rocket in the history of humanity to successfully reach Earth orbit. The room where the SpaceX team is watching the data explodes. Engineers who had not slept in 2 days are crying and embracing each other. People who had quietly updated their resumes that same week are screaming with relief. Elon Musk, watching from the center of the room, covers his face with his hands. He is crying again, but this time it's different. 2 months later, NASA awards SpaceX a contract to deliver cargo to the International Space Station. The contract is worth $1.6 billion. It doesn't just save SpaceX, it validates the entire idea. It tells the aerospace world that a private company can do what only governments had done before. At Tesla, Elon fights through December to close an emergency funding round. On Christmas Eve, December 24, 2008, the round closes with hours to spare. Tesla has enough money to continue. Both companies survive. Now, here is the part that the celebration stories almost always leave out. In the weeks before that fourth launch, Elon had to make a private decision about where the very last of his personal money would go. He did not have enough to fully protect both companies at the same time. It was SpaceX or Tesla. He had to choose which one received the resources that might make the difference. He chose SpaceX first. This is a fact. It is documented. And what it meant in practice was that Tesla employees went through an extended period not knowing with certainty whether their salary will arrive. Some of them had families, some of them had mortgages, some of them had turned down other job offers because they believed in what Tesla was trying to do. They had made a bet on this company, but they had not fully agreed to the specific risk they now were carrying. Some left. Those who could find other opportunities took them. Those who stayed did so partly out of loyalty, partly out of belief, and partly because they had already committed so much that leaving felt impossible. His decisions during this period were always calculated. That means made deliberately, after thinking carefully about every possible outcome. Elon Musk is not impulsive. He thinks in systems. He thinks 5 steps ahead. He understood the risk he was creating for the people who worked for him. He made the calculation anyway. Calculated decisions can still cause real pain to real people. Elon would later say he had no choice, that without SpaceX succeeding, neither company would have survived, and that the calculated risk was the only rational path through an impossible situation. His critics say that a leader always has a choice about how much of the cost they ask other people to carry. They say that a man with $180 million who could not pay his employees on time had at some point made a series of decisions that transferred enormous risk from himself onto people who never agreed to bear it. Was he a visionary who made the only decisions that could have saved 2 industries that have changed the world? Or was he a man so completely certain of his own rightness that the cost to others became invisible to him? This is a question with no clean answer. That's exactly why people are still arguing about it. Tesla did not just survive. It became something that almost no one in 2008 thought was possible. The Model S, released in 2012, received a road test score from Consumer Reports so high that the organization, which had been testing cars for decades, said they had never seen a number like it. They had to adjust their scoring system to accommodate it. The car was not simply good, it changed what people believed a car could be. By 2020, Tesla's market value, the total worth the market placed on the company, was higher than Toyota, Ford, and General Motors combined. Not because Tesla was selling more cars than those companies, it was selling far fewer, but because the world had been convinced, largely by Tesla's existence, that the future of transportation was electric. Tesla didn't just build cars, it changed the direction of an entire industry. Every major car manufacturer in the world began building electric vehicles because Tesla proved there was a real market for them. SpaceX moved faster than almost anyone in the aerospace world thought was possible. The Falcon 9 rocket became the most frequently launched orbital rocket on Earth. The Dragon spacecraft began carrying cargo and then people to the International Space Station. In May 2020, SpaceX carried 2 NASA astronauts to the station, making it the first private company in history to launch humans into orbit. They returned safely. SpaceX then began launching astronauts regularly, while also building a global internet satellite network called Starlink, while also developing Starship, a fully reusable spacecraft designed to carry 100 people at a time, initially to the Moon and eventually to Mars. Elon Musk became the wealthiest person in the world. Then he remained the wealthiest person in the world for an extended period. His combined companies changed the automotive industry, the aerospace industry, the satellite internet industry, and the global conversation about the long-term future of human civilization. And now, the encyclopedia. Think back to that boy in Pretoria, the one sitting alone in the corner with his legs stretched out on the floor, the one who had already read every book in the library and moved on to the reference section, the one who memorized facts about rocket propulsion and electrical systems and the chemical composition of materials, not for school, not for a test, not because anyone asked him to. That habit, that strange, lonely, relentless habit of filling his mind with technical knowledge across every domain he could find. When Elon Musk sat in meetings with senior NASA engineers decades later, he could engage with them at the level of the equations, not just the concepts. He had done the math himself. When battery suppliers told Tesla that a certain energy density was physically impossible to achieve at that price point, Elon knew enough material science to ask them to walk through their assumptions out loud. Sometimes those assumptions were wrong, sometimes they were right, but he knew the difference. When SpaceX engineers proposed solutions that were technically sound but expensive, he could suggest alternatives, not because he was guessing, but because he had been building a technical library inside his head since he was 9 years old. The lonely boy who read the encyclopedia did not become successful despite his strangeness. He became successful because of it. Because he had been building something for decades that looked like nothing, looked like a sad child with no friends and too many books, and turned out to be the most powerful tool he would ever own. This was the decision we mentioned at the very beginning. Not the SpaceX launch, not the Tesla funding round. The real decision happened before any of that. The decision was made on that cold September night in 2008, but it was also made every year before that, going back to the very beginning, when a 9-year-old boy in a quiet house in South Africa chose again and again to keep reading even when there was no obvious reason to. The decision to believe in something bigger than the evidence currently supports. The decision to keep going when the rational thing, the safe thing, the kind thing to yourself would be to stop. That is what this story is actually about. Not the rockets, not the billions, not the controversy, though the controversy is real and it matters, and reasonable people disagree about it seriously. The story is about what happens to a person who becomes so completely committed to a vision of the future that the present, with all its pain and uncertainty and rational reasons to quit, loses its power to stop them. We should be honest about the cost of that. The people who worked beside him paid prices they did not always choose to pay. Relationships broke, health broke. Promises were made that could not always be kept. The culture inside his companies has been described by former employees as thrilling and brutal in equal measure, a place where extraordinary things were possible and where human beings were sometimes treated as components in a system rather than as people with limits. Obsession is not the same as wisdom. Obsession is something sharper. It cuts through obstacles that wisdom would walk around. It achieves things that wisdom would declare impossible. But it cuts on both sides. It does not distinguish carefully between the obstacle and the person standing next to the obstacle. Whether that is a price worth paying is a question every person has to answer for themselves. History will record the rockets. History will record the electric cars and the satellites and the shift in what humans believe is technologically possible. But history looks clean in the books. Up close, it looks different. Up close, it looks like failure. It looks like a boy alone in a cold house with an encyclopedia and no one to tell him why it mattered. It looks like a man on a small Pacific island who has not slept in 2 days, watching a rocket and knowing that if this one fails, everything is over. It looks like tears in a journalist's interview. It looks like Christmas Eve and a phone call that almost did not come in time. And then, one more try.
One questions before you go. What did you learn from this story? Write in 5 sentences. Leave your answer below. There is no wrong answer. There is only what you actually think.